Black Desert Online has been the uncontested king of the action MMO genre pretty much since it launched. Not a single MMO has come close to competing with its graphics, its combat, or its sheer world size. We've had games attempt to emulate BDO's success to varying degrees and have fallen short every single time. Yet even despite the crown that it has retained for the better half of a decade, no king can truly rule forever.
At long last, no king rules forever, my son.
World of Warcraft is proof of that, having repeatedly lost its crown to Final Fantasy XIV over the last couple years. Now, you might be wondering, how do you know Black Desert has declined? Didn't they just sponsor hundreds of content creators, YouTubers, and Twitch streamers to advertise their game? Yeah, they did. And that very likely softened the decline BDO has suffered. Today, I want to go over the surprising decline Black Desert Online has witnessed recently, which is in no way indicative of the game dying. These numbers are far from showing that. Rather, the numbers are an indication that Pearl Abyss likely needs to do something to attract new players to the game. New players that will spend money on the game, because a decline year over year is never a good sign. "2021 was a big year for Pearl Abyss. Not only was revenue up 45% over 2020, but they also obtained publishing rights for Black Desert Online from Kakao, who had been publishing the game up until that point. They'd also recently announced Crimson Desert. Things were looking up for the studio, but things have been slowly getting worse ever since. With a delay of Crimson Desert indefinitely, Dokuvi's release pushed into the void, they really had nothing but BDO to rely on. In the first screen, you'll see the operating revenue from the first quarter of 2021 through the first quarter of 2022. While above the revenue for the second quarter of 2021, it was below 3 different quarters the same year. Of their 2 intellectual properties, Black Desert Online and EVE Online, Black Desert makes up the larger majority, with North America and Europe comprising half of the total gross earnings for their games, with over 70% of revenue being generated on the PC platform. Crimson Desert, Dokuvi, and Plan 8 were all new intellectual properties and have all yet to come to fruition. Their operating revenue, operating profit, and net profit are all down year over year as of the first quarter of 2022. Again, in the first screen, you'll see the operating revenue from the third quarter of 2021 through the third quarter of 2022. In terms of operating revenue comparatively to the third quarter of 2021, stats were up slightly, but down significantly from the fourth quarter. Black Desert continued to be responsible for the majority of revenue, with North America and Europe still comprising half of the total gross earnings for their games, and almost 80% of revenue being generated on the PC platform. It's honestly kinda crazy. Crimson Desert, Dokuvi, and Plan 8 were once again listed as being new intellectual properties, with new Web3 blockchain endeavors on the horizon. Their operating revenue was up 0.9% for the third quarter of 2022. Their operating profit was up by 17.6%, but their net profit was down by 20.5%, another sizable decrease. In the final quarter of 2022, Black Desert continued to garner the majority of revenue, with North America and Europe slowly continuing to make up a larger and larger percentage of total earnings, and almost 80% of revenue being generated on the PC platform once again. Their total operating revenue for the year was down 12.5%, their total operating profit was down 86%, and their net profit saw a decrease of 100 billion Korean won. That's 75 million US dollars, and what Genshin Impact typically tends to make each month globally, disregarding China. Before we delve into 2023's financials, which is what I'm sure you're all interested in, let me take a moment here to thank my insane patrons over on Patreon whose continued support allows for me to do regular videos like this every single day. You guys are incredible. 2023 opened to worse stats than 2022, lower than at any quarter in the last year, somewhat lower than the first quarter of 2022, and significantly lower than the fourth quarter of 2022. While Black Desert was still responsible for the majority of revenue for the first quarter, it was also responsible for less of a total, with North America and Europe continuing to comprise half of the total gross earnings for their games, and a little over 70% of total revenue being generated on PC, with mobile increasing by quite a bit this quarter. They continue to plan out strategies that include Crimson Desert, Dokuvi, and Plan 8, all to no avail. And here we are today, the second quarter seeing even further decline than last quarter, with arguably some of the worst stats in years. This is even after the Land of the Morning Light update and all the content creators advertising the game. Black Desert continues to be responsible for the majority of revenue, but as is evidenced, that total is smaller and smaller with each quarter. North America and Europe still make up half the total gross earnings for their games, and almost 80% of revenue being generated on the PC platform. Part of the growth strategy for future quarters is the disclosure of footage for Crimson Desert at Gamescom, which might have had a slight boost in stats, but is unlikely. Their operating revenue was down 16.6% for the second quarter of 2023, their operating profit at an all-time low, including a decrease in net profit. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure why the studio has been in such a decline in terms of revenue. According to Pearl Abyss, this is largely in part due to Black Desert Online continuing to fall, having its worst year in quite some time, suffering from a lot of competition on console and mobile. Is Black Desert Online dying though? No. Well, yes, but slowly, like all MMOs are. But is it impossible for them to turn things around and save it? Not at all. This intellectual property has proven time and time again that it has lasting power. Everyone loves BDO, and so do I. And I have faith Pearl Abyss will figure something out. If not, I guess there's always Crimson Desert, right? Which, interestingly enough, hey, look at that. I actually did a video on recently. If you're interested, hey, go check out that video. Also, quick shout out to Massively OP for linking and compiling these official revenue reports so I could go ahead and read them and document them.